वक्रतुण्ड महाकाय सूर्यकोटि समप्रभा निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणी विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः. A friend who was born in Pittsburgh had never been to Bharat before. So another friend invited him to come visit Bharat, and he was showing him around. And this friend flew into Delhi, and then this other friend who was of Indian origin picked him up, and he said, let's go to Kashmir. So they started driving towards Kashmir, and for anyone who's been to Kashmir, there's a lot of windy roads. It's a very hilly area. So the friend of Indian origin is driving, and this Western friend, he's scared. He's never used to such winding roads without the guardrails and the weather conditions and the tires, and with each turn he's becoming more and more scared. So he looks over to his friend who's driving and says, how do you deal with these conditions? And he says, just close your eyes during these curves. That's what I do. And you and I are like this person who's driving this car on the curves with our eyes closed. But we call it differently. We call it escape. We escape. We've tried to escape from these curves, which we'll call as difficult situations. And this is so powerfully shown in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, where Prince Arjuna is trying to escape from these challenges, from these situations, from his responsibilities. And that's why everyone has a universal love for Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And I'm sure many of you have read those emails that it's being studied in so many universities now, because it's such a universal scripture which so many people can relate to. This idea of escaping from difficulties. So some people close their eyes whenever these difficulties come, they escape. But then there's another group of people who don't escape from difficulties. They are so afraid of difficulties that may arise that they stop living in fear of what may arise. And here is where Puja Swami Tejamayana shared. There's three types of people when it comes to difficulties. One type, they don't begin out of fear of difficulties. The second type, they begin, but when they face the difficulty, what do? Turn back. The third type, they begin, and when they are faced with difficulties, what do? They rise above those difficulties. And a great example of that is our Hanumanji. Right? As Surasa is growing, then so is Hanumanji. And it's not just about growing, it's about becoming smaller as well. And we live such a lifestyle of not even beginning. We see that a lot with our young adults who are now choosing not to get married because of the fear of the difficulties that will arise. And anyone who is married, we know that there's difficulties. But those difficulties have made us stronger. And I'll explain more of that. This is why we're doing such retreats as we're doing in a couple of months on understanding marriage. Because if I don't understand marriage, then I'm like this person of fear that I don't even want to begin. And I meet a lot of young adults who feel that way about India. They don't want to go to India because of what they believe India is. No space and cleanliness and pollution and so on. They just have that fear. But what did they miss out on? Everything. With this general introduction, the topic for this evening's satsanga is cheerfully accepting or cheerfully facing difficult situations. And I appreciate the topics that are selected for these satsangs. They're so practical. Like this one. And I'm sure that there's many people watching online and here too, because this is living, isn't it? Let's get into this. The universe is not created by you or I. The universe is created by the Creator. And in the Creator's universe, there is no easy and there is no difficult. Where do these labels come from? From you and I. In God's universe, there are no labels. There's no good people or bad people. There's only people. These labels, this positive, this negative, is from our perspective. It is our projection. So in this world, in this room, though there is one of God's rooms, there's 50 ego's rooms, 50 rooms of the jiva. And in our experience, isn't it that even if there was pluses and minuses in the world, if there was positives and negatives, nothing is purely positive. Nothing is purely negative. Like today, we all love Pittsburgh because it's 50 degrees outside. But last month, we all hated Pittsburgh and we wanted to move to Florida. But if you're in Florida in the summer, you're going to be, I hate Florida. I want to be back in Pittsburgh. It's never like that. No sports team, no food, no person. Let's hypothetically put pluses and minuses in the world. Everything is balanced with pluses and minuses. And I'm beginning this thought because the subject of this satsang is difficult situations. But from the real perspective, it is only facing situations, not facing difficult situations. There are no easy situations. There are no difficult situations. And this will be the mindset with which we will explore the rest of the thoughts. It is our relationship with the universe that makes this easy or difficult. And the word that Puja Swami Chinmayananda uses is our contact with the world. How are we contacting the world? And think of those days when we are happy, when we're having a good day. Isn't the world a beautiful place then? And those days when we're having a bad day or a wrong mindset, same world, but it's a ugly world. Whatever lens with which we're looking at the world, that's how the world is. If we see a lot of joy in the world, it's because that's what I'm operating from. If I see a lot of sorrow in the world, it's because that's what I'm operating from. It is our relationship. And this we've all experienced. Using this example of public speaking, some people find this difficult, some people find this easy. Some people find mathematics difficult, some people find mathematics easy. For those who use lumosity, some people find the problem solving difficult, some people find it easy. It's not intrinsic to that game or to this activity. It is my projection of that. It is my relationship with this. And I met two identical girls, they're twins, who were in grade 5 in another city. And before I was to begin that class, they came up to me and said, Vivekji, if we stop thinking math is hard, will math no longer be hard? And I said, yes. And they said, good, we're going to stop thinking math is hard then. And 2 girls in grade 5, how their whole life will change if they could just go with this perspective. And connecting this to the scriptures, isn't it right from the start of Srimad Bhagavad Gita's teachings, Shloka 11 of chapter 2, where Lord Krishna says, the wise do not grieve. And he follows up for the living or the dead, but that's secondary. The primary statement is the wise do not grieve. Living or dead is irrelevant. So in the same way, the wise face situations, the wise don't label situations as easy or difficult. Because the wise live in God's world, not in the ego's world. This is what we're trying to rise above the ego's world and to start living in God's world. Now, how to do this? The first time that one ever goes to the ocean, one goes to a natural source of water where there's waves, it's quite challenging to face those actual physical waves. But those who have much experience with that, much experience in being trained with swimming in the waves, they can just lie down on their back and just float. There is no difficulty there. But it only came with training. And we're funny people. Indians are funny people when it comes to training with swimming. How do we learn how to swim? How did our parents teach us how to swim? They said, come, 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 and they pushed us. They pushed us into the deep end of the water, and you have no choice but to work hard and save yourself. They're still looking out. But my point is, that is a form of training. There's a movie that recently came out. I think it's called The Last Soldier with Mark Wahlberg, and he's in Afghanistan, I think. And in the beginning of the movie, they show the training that some of the people in the army have to go through. And a lot of it is enduring hot and cold temperatures. Like being in the ocean at night when it's very cold and there's no way you can dry yourself. I heard another form of training that our Navy SEALs go through is that they have to stay awake for a full week and operate, from that perspective. We can barely stay awake for 15 minutes, but for 168 hours. Now, what is the vision of all of this? Because those soldiers may be stuck in a desert. They may be stuck in a cold place. They may be stuck where they can't sleep. And this is why our Puja Swami Chinmayananda has said, we serve as a army. And many of us can spin it in a negative way, why should we be in an army and everyone's thinking this direction. But think more deeply. When is an army involved? They're involved when there is a need. For example, if there's too much snow in a city, they call in the army. If there's flooding in a city, they call in the army. When there's enemies at one's border, they call in the army. But they have to be trained. And if they're not trained, they suffer with everyone else. I encourage all of us to liberate our minds from the idea that training only takes place in the secular world. Training takes place in the sacred world too. Just like many of you go through continued professional development and you can't keep working without it, you and I cannot live cheerfully without continued professional development. We come into such forums thinking, I've attended one discourse on cheerfully facing difficult situations, and I leave here and, someone cuts me off, and all of a sudden I'm irate and think, what kind of speaker did they bring to this Chinmay Sanjeevani? I haven't learned anything. In our own secular training, do we learn right away? We don't. But we get it. We're patient with our secular training. But when we come to our sacred training, for some reason, we have these misaligned expectations. And that's why we have to liberate our notions of what sacred training is. It requires a much higher level of offering ourselves because the reward is that much more too. It's more demanding, but it's more rewarding. Like a 100-meter race versus a 10-kilometer race, which one is more demanding for you and I? It is the 10-kilometer race, but it's much more rewarding as well. That's this training too. Keep that mindset, training. And now I will give you a powerful quote so that we don't lose this idea of training. This is what Puja Swami Tejamananda shared with us. The more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. The more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. This is an awesome quote that if we just remembered would be like a lighthouse to us. Like a boat is looking for a lighthouse to avoid those rocks. If I keep remembering this quote, I will know what training is all about. Do any of you have Twitter accounts? Not one person in this room. What kind of backwards room is this? So here's your RAM, because I'm leaving tomorrow morning to go to Niagara Falls. It's your reflection assignment of the month. I will be back here on April 7th. I'm going to ask you the same question. How many of you have Twitter accounts, okay? And I know who signed up for Twitter. Don't think that, oh, how am I supposed to know? I want you to sign up for a Twitter account. And I want you to follow me not because I want more followers, but all I do every morning is I write one quote. And the idea is that, hey, remember this lighthouse. And it's not my messages anyways. It's whether it's Gautam Buddha's or Randy Posh or Puja Swami Chinmayananda. Because we need these lighthouses, isn't it? Just yesterday I was talking to a gentleman who said, you know, when we're in the presence of some of our philosophical teachers, we know what to do. We know that we need to practice, but as soon as they're out of sight, then out of mind. So let us keep it in sight so we can keep it in mind. There is a Sanskrit word that encapsulates this quote very much, and that word is tapas. The more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. Tapas comes from the root tapati, which means to burn. Like sweat, see? When you sweat, you burn. When you burn, you sweat. So tapas is voluntary discipline. If shared in English, we tend to define it as austerity, but who really knows what austerity is? Voluntary discipline. Now think why. Why is it that tapas is encouraged by our sadhus? Why is it encouraged by the Shastra? Lord Krishna says in chapter 4, shloka 28, that tapas is a form of yajna. It will help purify the mind. Tapas is voluntary discipline because only when I practice voluntary discipline will I be ready for involuntary discipline. Here is a classic example. I just told that, I have to sleep in many people's homes and in many time zones and eat different kinds of food and so on and so forth. Now suppose I've not trained myself to embrace such inconsistency. Then will I ever have peace of mind? So this is a form of tapas, of training. Tapas enables titiksha, going back to Sanskrit. Voluntary discipline enables involuntary discipline. Now when you and I think of tapas, what do we think of? We think of Aparna, like Mother Parvati who first she gave up eating fruits and she only ate leaves. Then she gave up leaves. That's where the name Aparna comes from, without leaves. Then she gave up water. Then she gave up air. And you and I are thinking, we can't give up dessert. Let alone giving up the rest. We can't even give up dessert. So we think, oh, it's too difficult, so don't do it. Don't do it. Tapas need not be to such extremes. No different than we don't expect a 5-year-old to calculate 12 times 12. Because they need to train themselves with 1s and 2s and 5s and grow up from there. So you and I too need to grow up with our voluntary discipline, with our sweating, with our burning. And my focus is not on that, but I'll give you some relative examples. A tapas is only opening your mouth for food 3 times a day. That cuts out all snacking. That is a great, see already everyone's in, what kind of person have we invited? See, just shock. Try it. Take up that tapas. Take up the tapas that you will not turn the knob in your shower past a certain degree of temperature. That you'll only take lukewarm to mild showers, but not hot showers, especially in winter. And see, these are only physical tapases. Only when I practice physically can I grow up to practice mental tapas. You know what a good mental tapas is? Going back to food, is not labeling food. That this is just food, not having likes and dislikes. That burns away the ego's world. See, the ego's world, there's likes and there's dislikes. But in God's world, there is no likes or dislikes. So this is how I train myself to rise to these higher levels. What is the reason that we would practice voluntary discipline? The reason is the most important. If I don't have a purpose for discipline, I am not going to practice that discipline. In a recent e-vichara entitled Never Give Up, in the first line I had shared, if the reason why we sleep so much is because we don't have a better reason to wake up. Think about it practically. If I had a good reason to wake up, why would I want to sleep? If you had something more enlightening to do, you wouldn't be here wouldn't be here right now. But generally you have some sort of idea that there'll be some sort of enlightenment or food. So we've come here. We are practical people in that way. What is the purpose of this tapas? Because if I don't have a purpose, as I was sharing yesterday, in Bhaja Govindam, Adi Shankaracharya rips on certain people who are practicing voluntary discipline but don't know why they're doing it. They're sitting in front of fire or, having very minimal clothing, but they don't know why. So they become frustrated, they become bitter, they become isolated. But if I know why, then I begin to grow. And I'd said we should start with physical tapas, but it's not ending there. It should grow to mental tapas, to intellectual tapas, and higher like that. In a war, whoever controls a higher ground essentially controls the war. If you've seen the second Lord of the Rings movie, they're in that castle and they have all of that fortification on top, so they control that war. If my intellect has a purpose, my mind and body will follow suit. But if my intellect is wavy about why it's doing something, my mind will go one way, my body will go one way. So through this tapas, I have to give my body a purpose, then I have to give my mind a purpose, then my intellect a purpose. My body, the purpose is I need to stay healthy. Why? Because I want to run the marathon in May here in Pittsburgh. Mind, I want to be able to sit quietly without speaking. Why do I want to do this? Because that's the only way I'll get to know who I am better. That's a tapas too. Intellectually, my tapas is I will let go of likes and dislikes. Why? Because I want to know how God's world is. But see, if my purpose is not clear about being quiet, for example, then what am I going to do? I'm going to keep my mouth shut, but I'll keep winking at you. Or writing you notes and so on and so forth. And it's more frustrating. I should just talk to you then. So the purpose has to be clear. And as I had mentioned, tapas, voluntary discipline, enables involuntary discipline. People, as an example, who sleep on the floor, they can sleep anywhere. But people who only sleep on duvets and have their body pillow and so on and so forth, if asked to sleep on the floor, they're rattled by that. So the voluntary discipline is not there, so the involuntary discipline is not there. And what Adi Shankaracharya highlights in Viveka Chudamani He says the purpose of titiksha is to allow vichara to happen. Titiksha, which is involuntary discipline, helps me to stay balanced. Recently I was talking to one of our sevikas who had hurt her arm, and she was saying, I was practicing, I'm not this body, I'm not this body, I'm not this body, but it didn't go. It didn't go very far. And so think, if my arm is in great pain, let's even go to us. Suppose I didn't eat before the discourse. Then I may be speaking to you, but I'm not speaking to you clearly because I'm identified with this body. I can't do that vichara. I can't endure that hunger. So there's no balance. But if I learn to endure, if I learn to practice titiksha, then I can keep up with my reflection. So Adi Shankaracharya is spinning that in a highly sacred way. And this is why in the qualifications of a spiritual student, one of them is the Shat Sampatti, the sixfold inner wealth. And fourth inner wealth is titiksha. This makes me wealthy. Now everyone's attention, wealthy? Yes, how do we become wealthy? In the Yaksha Prashna, I'll give you some context to this. Yudhishthira shows up at this lake, and his 4 brothers are dead. And Yudhishthira, who's suffering because of thirst, is about to drink some of this water. And he hears this voice that says, this is my lake, you cannot drink this water. Your brothers didn't follow, and so now they're dead. And Yudhishthira says, but I'm thirsty, I need this. And he says, you can have this water only if you answer these questions on dharma. So Yudhishthira begins with them. And one of the questions this voice asks is, who is the most wealthy person? Who is the person who's ever wealthy? And when you and I think, we think Rockefeller, Carnegie, etc. We think people who have royalties, the Beatles, you always get royalties from the Beatles songs and so on. But the answer that Yudhishthira gives is the one who is even-minded. They're always balanced, never shaken, following what Lord Krishna has taught. So, whether they have physical wealth or don't, they're unaffected by that. So if I know the purpose of me practicing voluntary discipline is so I can be balanced when the world is changing. If I know that I need to be balanced, because that's the only way I can think of something higher, I will begin to do this. And if we think about the lives at a secular level, every achiever had a high level of endurance. Whether it's our athletes, like our Winter Olympic athletes, right? This is why, as I've mentioned many times in our e-vicharas, Canada excels in the Winter Olympics because they know the purpose. How much they have to endure when it comes to cold, when it comes to training. And if they mess up just a little bit, how much hurt they can get, or how they can ruin their chances. But they endure so much because that's the only way to achieve. People who are inventors, people who are scientists, people who discover cures, that they endure all, are freedom fighters. I had shared about Shukadev, I think yesterday or the day before. He would ask his friends to beat him. And what kind of friend do you want us to be? And he said, because I know the British are going to beat me, so I want to prepare myself. Look at that, tapas and titiksha. But he knew that he had to do this to achieve this victory, to achieve this freedom. This is the vision that we must invoke when it comes to facing the situations of life. That a difficult situation is not difficult. It is simply presented to make us stronger. And haven't we heard that proverb, whatever doesn't kill us only makes us stronger? And what's beautiful is that if we know Vedanta, it's even clearer. if I die, I'll be born again, right? If it kills me, good, I'll be born again. If I'm not killed, I'll be stronger. So either way, I win. Isn't this what Lord Krishna told Prince Arjuna? If you win the war, you get the kingdom. If you lose the war, you become the king of heaven. So either way, you are going to win. Why would you leave this opportunity? It's like people who are good at gambling. Technically, the house always wins, but some people are so intelligent that they never lose. Like in craps, they know how to bet so that they never lose. You're all thinking, hey, how do you know all of this? The vision is Bhagwan, the creator. This is his world, not our world. And he changes the world in such a way that this will make us stronger. And if we don't learn to be stronger, that same situation is going to come again and again and again till we learn to be stronger. Going back to lumosity, if you play that pinball game and if you don't get a certain number of questions right or the ball in its right place, they just don't move you to that. They actually move you down stages. They don't move you up. Right? You have to keep on playing stage 10 till you get it all right till you can move to stage 11. They don't change it. So for us too, every day, let alone every day, every hour, every situation, we should analyze whether we've grown stronger or not. This is that vision. So an older lady had picked up her friend, and they were driving from her one lady's retirement home, and they were going to the shopping mall. And they're driving, and the lady goes through one red light, and their friend, doesn't think of it. Maybe she just saw yellow and went through the red. And she goes through a red light. And now she's a bit, shaking by this. She goes through a third red light. So she asks her friend, he goes, are you seeing these red lights, how are you driving right now? And she looks at her, she says, I'm driving. She had forgotten that she's driving. She had no vision. Relating it to you and I, isn't that how we live sometimes? And Lord Krishna calls such a personality, he calls them Anaryan. Aryan means the master of circumstances. Anaryan means the one who is a slave to circumstances. See, this universe is going to change and change and change. And if I am not with this vision that these changes will make me stronger, I will suffer more and more and more. I learned this at a very intimate level. When we were at the Vedanta course, they take away your money, your passport, your phone, your computer. They take away everything. And they put a security guard there, so you can't leave these 7 acres either. And when I went into the Vedanta course, I thought, this is going to be a magical place like we see in the movies where everyone's floating around and nobody gets dirty and, right, everyone's giving everyone blessings, live forever, live forever. But as soon as I got there, I realized, hey, what is happening in the different places I've been to is happening at the ashram too. Greed, politics, jealousy, anger, all of that happens there too. And most of the places that's happening is inside me. That lust, that fear, that so on. But in the ashram, like I said, they took everything away, so I can't leave the ashram and go see a movie. I can't call up a friend. I can't go to a restaurant. I can't go for a run. So you have two choices. Either you suffer or you grow out of it. And after someone suffers so much, they get tired of suffering. And then they don't leave that as an option. They just grow out of it. See, in our society, it's very conducive to not face the situation and just escape. We see this with the level of intoxicants, the level of indulgences that we engage in. It's just so I don't have to face the projection that I'm creating. Cheerfully facing difficult situations, only Vedanta can allow us to do this. Only Vedanta can enable us to do this. Because Vedanta is about vision. See, the word Vedanta is, we technically define it as the end of the Vedas. But antaha also means inside, like antarkarana. So the inside of the Vedas, and really that means the inside of knowledge. So Vedanta is teaching us to identify with vision and not with sight. So go inside and develop or train yourself with that vision and watch how easy living becomes. A few other thoughts on how to cheerfully face situations. When you're in high school, if you have someone in high school or you're in high school, who is your greatest source of influence? And don't say it's your parents, because it's not. It is your friends. Up until the age of 15 approximately, it is our parents. Whether good or bad, it is our parents. But 15 and above approximately, it becomes our friends. So here, when we talk about being cheerful, if we're around people who are always miserable, we're going to start to be miserable too. If we're around people who complain about the weather, we just start complaining about the weather too. When we're around people who don't talk about the weather, then we don't talk about the weather too, because we know they're not talking about it. So we have to surround ourselves by people who are practicing this titiksha. And here is where it's better to be in India. In India, I find people have a much stronger titiksha shakti than we do here. There, nobody complains because nobody listens to complaints. Here, nobody does either, but we think they do, so we complain. But nobody does. So we have to be around people who are practicing what we're thinking about. Another is, we have to, like I had mentioned earlier, we have to keep reminding ourselves to practice. If we think about the lives of people like Terry Fox ran across Canada with a prosthetic limb because he had cancer in one of his legs. So whenever I'm running, for example, and I feel tired, why am I doing this? I should think I have 2 legs that function fully. And he endured this, so I should too. So it's not just with people around me that are alive, but I can think about people who are leaders, people who lead by example. And at the highest level, who is the one who practices the highest level of titiksha? Our original mother and father, meaning Bhagwan. Visualize you're at your university commencement, your college commencement, and you go on stage and you get to speak a few words about whatever. And you go on speaking about, I'm grateful for my teachers, I'm grateful for the governor, I'm grateful for the principal and so on. But you never say you're grateful for your parents. And your parents are sitting there, listening to this. How do your parents react to that? I'm sure they're hurt to a certain level, but they let it slide. Now that's one circumstance where we don't remember our parents. When was the last time that we remembered our original parent? When was the last time that we said, hey, it's because of my original parent and not because of me? How much God endures us, to the extent where we say our parent doesn't even exist. Where did you and I come into the picture if it weren't for the Creator? So the highest practitioner of titiksha is Bhagwan. And so if we remember how much he endures us, we can endure each other just a little bit more then. Vedanta is the only way. So surround yourself by people who are practicing being cheerful. Not just physically, but surround yourself mentally by people who are practicing being cheerful. And at the highest level, let Bhagwan be the one who endures. You and I can't. Many times we say we should be like Lord Rama. who here is close to being like Lord Rama? We can't. But we can be like Hanumanji. And here I'm saying that's impossible too. But relatively, I can be a servant of the Lord, not the Lord. Did Hanumanji have any fear? Why not? Why should you fear when Lord Rama is there? It's not his fear to take upon himself. In the movie Kung Fu Panda, Master Oogway is teaching Master Shifu about the illusion of control. Those people who are under the illusion of control, I control you, I control this, I control the weather, those people are afraid the most. But those people who are not under the illusion of control, they have no fear. We have a surgeon who comes to one of our classes in another center, and we got into discussing this subject. And he says, when I'm operating on someone on this table, then I do my best, and that's it. I don't control if that person survives or doesn't survive. I control what I can do, but survival or not survival, that's not in my control. And he's a pretty cheerful person. He doesn't have a lot of fear going into that operation room or into that surgery. And it's practicing letting go of that illusion of control, that the only controller, we just prayed to him, Vakratunda Mahakaya, is Bhagavan Vigneshwara. He controls the challenges. He's the controller, not you and I. So, if we can, again, around us, in our mind, and finally to surrender, he is my support, then how can I not be cheerful? And if you look at all of the images around us, they're all cheerful. Vamana Bhagavan, Gautam Buddha, Bhagavan Hanumanji, showing us that this is the way we are supposed to live too. And all of the expressions of Bhagavan's lives, you just studied Srimad Bhagavatam, for example, how difficult was Lord Krishna's life? How difficult was Lord Rama's life? How difficult is Lord Shiva's life? But at no point did they lose that cheer. And don't think that you're any different than them. We've just forgotten that that's who we are. And the more we remember, the more cheerful we are. This is a high-level message to facing difficult situations with cheer. Now, I'm fully appreciative that we are busy people. And when we are busy, we forget. We forget to buy certain groceries, we forget directions, we forget people's names because we're busy. Our mind is in many places, which really means our mind is in no places. So I try to share a systematic approach to such subjects, helping us to remember. And that's why I use acronyms, for example. Yesterday I used an acronym LID. Liberate, integrate, dedicate. That's how our relationship should be with a spiritual family. Here too, I'm going to bring for all of you a philosophy called ANTS philosophy. A-N-T-S philosophy. A gentleman was watching a group of ants beside him, and he was just watching them. And he put his hand out in front of an ant that was moving, and when he did, he saw that ant moved around his hand. So he moved his hand, and that ant moved again. So he moved it again. What did the ant do the third time? Started crawling onto his hand, and to get to wherever it was going. And he began studying ants with more attention then. And he learned 4 principles from ants. And I want to share that with you. And 2 context-based thoughts is, number 1, how reflective he would have been to keep an open mind to actually learn from ants. And the second is how you and I are not that different from animals. We are not that different, but we have a choice and they don't. They simply follow this pattern. We have a choice to follow this pattern, which is more demanding, but it's more rewarding then too. Okay? So when he was putting his hand out like this and he was watching these ants move around and finally go over his hand, the first principle he learned from ants is never give up. If we want to cheerfully face difficult situations, that involves us never giving up. If we give up, the cheer is gone. If we don't give up, the cheer will be there. Do not give yourself the option of giving up. But this has to be practiced at a relative level. In our home, when we were growing up, wasting food was not an option. Anything that came onto that plate came into one's stomach too. And sometimes when we made mistakes, it was very painful, but then we stopped making such mistakes. I met another lady who grew up in Bangkok, and the rule in their home was any water that poured into a glass had to be drunk then. To learn to not waste water. And see how these small principles of, say, never giving up on a plate of food, then it carries on to bigger principles, never giving up on a job or a marathon or whatever it may be. But if I keep giving up on these small challenges, how will I not give up on big challenges? If you take up a book, finish the book. Like that. Never give up. And he learned that from these ants. The second observation he made. All summer long, what are ants doing? They're thinking about winter. That winter is going to come. So all summer long they're working, collecting food and sugar and nuts and whatever else that ants collect. Who am I supposed to know? Whereas, if he was observing other insects like grasshoppers, they don't. They just go around jumping around and annoying people. And that's why during the winter time, ants survive and grasshoppers die. So the second principle was, look ahead. Just like in driving, right? We look ahead to see when our GPS tells us, prepare to make a right turn. And some GPSs are so terrible. I've experienced that, and after you pass it, okay, get ready to make your right turn. And if you don't know the city, what are you supposed to do? So, look ahead. And that's what these ants do. That good times don't last, good people last. For us, when it's the middle of July, and suppose we're here and we're doing our Balavar camp, let us not think that minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit is not going to come. It will come. We should look ahead. Then we face the present and the future cheerfully. This idea of looking ahead, as I mentioned earlier, some people don't look ahead out of fear. But just because I feared, it doesn't mean it's not going to come. It's like playing hide and go seek with kids, and they close their eyes. You can't see me. Right? Just because I close my eyes doesn't mean that it's not going to come. So look ahead, and let us be cheerful with what's going to come. Let us prepare for that. Here's where Puja Swami Tejamananda shared, in life you either get what you expect or what you don't expect. If you expected it, why are you crying? If you didn't expect it, what could you have done so? Why are you crying? The third observation that he made with these ants is all winter long, what are ants doing? Thinking of summer. All summer they're thinking of winter, so they're looking ahead and preparing. All winter they're thinking about summer, that summer will come. So the third is, stay positive. That tough times don't last, tough people last. Being negative, does that ever change the circumstance? When I meet parents and they have worries about their children, especially those children who are in university or above, and I ask them, do you think you worrying about your children is going to change the circumstance? Your health suffers, then their health suffers, and so on. Once they leave your home, what are you supposed to do? What control did you have while they're in your home, leave alone when they leave your home? You don't. So, what is the point in that negativity? I was talking to another family who, they were coming late to Balavihar. And as they were running late, there was frustration, why did we leave late, and so on and so forth. But as we were discussing, he was sharing that it was his fault. that, hey, I'm doing late and there's nothing I can do about it. It's not like I can fly here. So what's done is done, and move forward. Why bring in that negativity? It doesn't mean we should be complacent and keep on coming late. Some people are like that too. I met one person, and he would come late to class all the time. And so I had talked to him the first time lightly, second time more seriously, third time I said, hey, this is not going to work. And he would probably say, this is just my nature. Right? And you can't change your nature. See the complacency. We have to stay positive. And what's awesome about this mindset is it creates a snowball effect. When I begin practicing staying positive, I begin to see more positivity around me, so I am more positive, so I see more positivity. And what this principle is saying is just start. Just start and see the change that takes place. And that is the case with any virtue. Just start waking up earlier, as an example. Just start thinking before speaking. And it will create, that the positivity is immediate. And so we want to do it more. And the last observation he made. What was the first observation? First principle? Never give up. Number 3? Stay positive. Number 2? Look ahead. And number 4, as he was observing these ants, is that each ant was doing his or her own work. Was not looking at the other ant or comparing them or jotting down how many hours they worked or how much of a quota they fulfilled. They simply did their best. So the 4th principle is do your best, which is very similar to never give up. But I can never give up and not do my best. But see how it's supplemented that I should never give up and do my best. And at a high level, when we do our kartavya karmas, which is our regular and special responsibilities, there may or may not be a fruit that comes with it. But we shouldn't be fulfilling our responsibilities for fruit anyways. Whenever we are engaged in responsibilities and are looking for a fruit, we've lost out on that opportunity. We've brought in expectations, and this is where I feel sad when I don't get it, I feel excited when I get it, I compare, I judge and all of that. But if I stick to my regular and special responsibilities, and if anything comes or doesn't come, fine, what goes away? Likes and dislikes. That's like uparama. If we go back to the shat sampati, or the 6-fold wealth, uparama is essentially abiding by one's responsibilities. And that helps us to let go of likes and dislikes, or in other words, let go of the ego's world. Let go of difficulty. That is a projection of the ego. Do your best. And our Puja Swami Chinmayananda, that was his clarion call. Do your best and leave the rest. Be responsible. Practice dharma. And doing your best, see, this I said was at a lighter level. To really do one's best, you have to understand the high philosophy first. How do I know what my best is? It's easy to say I've done my best, but how do I know? It's only when I get to know myself do I know what my best is. If anyone lifts weights, if you go to a gym once and lift a barbell, for example, and you're tired, that's not your best. You have to go there many times to realize, okay, no, I've added 2.5 pounds, or I take off a 5 pounder, or whatever it is. After much experimentation do I actually know what my best is. We have to get to know ourselves to know what our best is. In other words, I have to start training myself to tune into that vision to be able to know what my best is. Never give up. Look ahead, stay positive, and do your best. Then we will cheerfully face all situations. And the last thought, if we go back to chapter 2 of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, I shared with you a message that Lord Krishna had offered. At the beginning, He says, the wise do not grieve for the living nor the dead. And further on, he uses the word titiksha. He tells Prince Arjuna to endure heat and cold, pleasure and pain, success and failure. And he says, Arjuna, the person who practices titiksha, or in other words, the person who endures difficulty, that person is fit for immortality. He says, amritatvam. That person is fit for that. So why should we cheerfully face difficult situations? It's the only way to be happy. It's obvious. This is the wealth that we must pursue in our lives. We pursue a lot of different types of wealth, but none of them mean anything unless there's peace of mind. That's what the subject is. Peace of mind, irrespective of articles, beings, and circumstances. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ. So that we will do 15